Alright guys, Southern Liberty Construction here, working on my 04 F250 four-wheel drive 6-liter. This is a late model 04 motor. It was built in February of 2004, which is a late model. The motors that were built in 2003 are an early model 04. So if you're wondering if your door is stamped on the sticker as a 2003 mid to early 2003, that would be an early 2004 motor and truck. If it's early 2004, that's a late 2004 model. What we're working on today, and I'll go over a couple of things that be helpful for you guys to figure out where your parts are when you need to replace them. The learning process for me, I'm used to working on bigger diesels, not smaller motors. This is my first personal diesel. So bear with me. I'm trying to give you guys some info on what I found, what will help you, and go from there. We're doing the blue spring repair. There was a recall, from my understanding, on the fuel pressure regulator, which is mounted on top of the motor on the side of the fuel filter on the top of the motor. You can see this shape right here. I've already taken the manifold off and taken it apart so you can see it. Before I get back into that, we bought some bad fuel at Murphy's, is what we've come to the conclusion on. Bought it when I got off work, drove the truck home, drove the truck the next evening to go into town. About 7 miles, the truck died. We found a bunch of debris, not rust, not metal. We found sand and clay soil in the diesel, and we have no fuel line leaks. We've done a fuel pressure systems test, everything passed perfectly. Oil pressure systems test, everything passed perfectly. The only issue we had was debris in the filter, which is down here on the frame. This top filter didn't have anything in it. However, that doesn't mean something didn't pass through. Wound up having some lunging, running away, some people call it, and ultimately it came down to being a couple of things. The IPR valve was bad, the screen was missing. A lot of people are up in arms about the spring missing, or the screen, not the spring, the screen was missing. They say it can cause damage, this, that, and the other. Man, I've not found one mechanic from Ford or anywhere else that'll say that that screen causes any issues. When it gets into the HPOP, the high pressure oil pump, it's destroyed into a million little pieces, and it'll filter itself out down into the oil pan. It may get caught up in the oil filter, which is right here, or it'll get caught in the screen here, chopped up into fine pieces. In the oil cooler, the screen for the oil cooler. We have no oil pressure issues. I'm not going to sit here and tell you need to take the whole top end intake manifold and turbo and all that out just to see if the screen's there. I'm almost 100% positive it's not. But consult with your mechanic before you do anything. The reason you need to know if it's a late model or an early model 04 is if you get that lunging, running away, stalling, that can be fuel, it can be oil. Sometimes it can be a valve, sometimes it could be a head gasket leak. We have no head leaks. We don't have any fuel or exhaust mixing with the coolant. No other signs, or maybe you get some oil in the coolant. I think more in the diesels, specifically this motor, you'd get exhaust fuel in the coolant, and we have none of that. So there are a couple of things that you can look at. For me, it wound up being bad fuel, which ultimately led to a complete injector 8 failure. It burnt out, it wouldn't work. So we flushed some stuff out of the system. We're getting a hold of Murphy's to try to get reimbursed for the damage, and we're going from there. However, let me get back on track here. Early model 04 6-liter diesels, the IPR, the injection pressure regulator, is mounted under the turbo. It's a pain in the butt to get to. You do have to pull the turbo and you do have to pull your intercooler tube on this side. You will have to take the alternator out and the belt off in order to get the turbo out in most all cases, unless you can find a way to get it out. You will have to take your intake tube and your air filter and that whole intake tube out. It's a pain in the butt. And I've seen in some cases where you have to take the fuel filter, oil filter housing out as well. Luckily I didn't have to do that. Late model 04 motors, the IPR valve is down here on the driver's side, in the back, behind the valve cover, and the FICM, the fuel injection control module. So you will have to take the fuel injection control module out. You will have to take the air intake out, the air filter out, the air filter box or housing, whatever you want to call it, out. The coolant reservoir will have to get moved to the side. It's got 2 bolts in the top, move it to the side, take off. There's 2 hoses. There's this one which goes to the radiator, and there's this one here which goes back to the manifold. What we did is we took the one that goes to the manifold off and bent it back over there, and then we took the one that comes off the radiator and looped it back over to where the other tube went on and clamped it on so we wouldn't lose any of the coolant out of here, and just pushed it to the side. Pulled the wiring harness. We pulled 6, 7, and 8 injectors plugs off. There's a ground you'll have to pull off, and then you'll have to pull the IPR off. I'm going to tell you right now, there's a stud in the back that the ground's bolted to. You can see in the video it says to pull it out. If you pull it out, it does make it easier. It gives you about a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch more clearance to get your hand in there without causing pain to your hand. It is going to be a pain in the butt to get the wrap, the heat wrap, off the connector on the IPR, and it's going to be a pain in the butt, and you have to do it to unsnap the heat blanket on the IPR, or you won't be able to get your socket on it. You will have to get a socket. It's an IPR socket. It's a Ford issue socket. I got this at O'Reilly's for 30 bucks. I have an adapter here to fit on my socket. You will need this with this tip or a swivel here going to your socket. I just decided to reduce it down. The smaller socket wrench gave me more room. This will also work on the oil filter or the fuel filter cap on the frame to get it off. However, O'Reilly's or Advanced Auto, both of them, well, I know Advanced Auto sells a 36 millimeter shallow socket for the fuel filter caps to get them off. Here's the part number and the brand. Costs about 12 bucks for that. So I would recommend getting that socket for sure, and the IPR socket down over there. Now, the IPR, we replaced it. We still had the lunging and stuff, and I'm going to tell you straight up what my mechanic said and what I found out. Lunging and dying can be caused by the ICP. That's the injection control pressure sensor. That's mounted over here under the intercooler tube, which you do not have to remove. Is this sensor right here. This, when I replaced the IPR, still had the lunging. Replaced this, and the lunging went away. IPR runs about 200 and something bucks. The ICP runs about 165. I'm 100% positive, because when we unplugged the ICP, the lunging went away. When we plugged it back in, after the computer accounted for it, about a minute, 2 minutes later, the lunging stalling kicked back in. Unplugged it, it went away. So the ICP was part of it. Then we had a rough idle situation, and it wound up being injector 8 failure. Had that replaced. Now we're 100%. Back to the blue spring. The reason I call it the blue spring repair is because there is a blue spring, as you can see. Now this kit from TechSmart comes with a new seat, and if you notice, this is brass instead of plastic. Comes with the O-ring already on it, brand new O-ring bushing. And then the blue spring comes with a new air valve piece with the O-ring already on it. The air valve goes in the smaller hole in the top. The seat, plunger, and spring go in the bottom. Then you'll get a new gasket. You will get a new manifold. This piece here, this nipple, you will have to take out of the old manifold and put into the new manifold. And if you see, here's the old manifold, here's the new manifold. There was some sort of update to this manifold. Speculation is it was the depth of the valley or ridge in here. A lot of people are getting leaks and things of that nature. I don't know exactly what the update was, but you will have to take this piece out here and put it on the new one. On the back side of this nipple, there's an O-ring. Take the old one off, lube it up with a little diesel fuel, and put it back on. Slide it all the way down to the bottom here. Thread that in until it stops. Do not over tighten it because this is a aluminum manifold. Now in the kit you're going to get 3 loose O-rings. You're going to get 2 black and a green. The bigger black one goes on the nipple. The smaller black one here goes on the inside of the nipple in this set of ridges here. Then you're going to get a green one. The green one goes on an older model, possibly an early 0460 with a little bit different setup. Some speculation is it goes in the Excursion 6.0s. I don't know. I don't have an Excursion 6.0. It's the same motor, but I don't know, to answer your question, where that green one goes. I called the technical support for TechSmart, and they said that green one is extra for this truck. Don't use it. Don't put the green one in here. Use the black one in there, the small black one in there. Now when you go to put all this back in, you take that black seat, push it in the hole, make sure your air valve is seated appropriately and pushed all the way in there. Make sure your gasket for the back of this is seated in appropriately, and then you can put it back on. I will tell you right now, the kit also comes with 4 new Torx T27 bolts. A T25 will work and it will not strip it out. Most people use a T25. T27 is fairly uncommon. There have been some problems with the OEM and all other brands that make this in stripping out here. Before you put them in this back together, make sure you can thread the 4 Torx bolts that come with it, Torx screws that come with it, in freely before you put it in, to make sure that the threading on those new 4 Torx screws are correct. If they're not, and you have any sort of tension when you're putting this together, do not use them. Reuse the old ones. It may be in your best interest to use the old ones, period. It's several $100s for this assembly if you damage those threads. The reason I went with TechSmart, this will be a lot of other questions. I went with TechSmart. Here's why. BWD makes their parts to OEM specs. TechSmart is a subsidiary of BWD, owned by SMP Corporation, that takes the OEM specs and makes them better. Takes any defects out of them and fixes them. So the TechSmart is, for all intents and purposes, better than OEM. Don't use any other brand. You can use the OEM, the BWD, or the TechSmart. My encouragement would be to use the TechSmart. And before we run out of time here, and I'll make a second video, you are going to have to take out the air filter and housing. You don't have to take the intake out. I removed the water hose. You are going to lose some coolant. Put a rag down there in the coolant so nothing gets gummed up, and a rag down there for the fuel. And I will make another video here to show you what we're doing. Be back soon.